Hello everyone, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG and welcome to part 2 of our cube set review for the Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth. There'll be a link down to part 1 where we go over white, blue, black and red. In this episode, in part 2, we're going to be going over green, multicoloured, colourless and lands. As always, I am joined by my co-host James for these episodes. If you like us talking, check out our podcast Powerful Nothing. It's two friends talking all things magic. With all that out of the way, let's start talking about some green cards. Yeah, let's move on to our first green card of the day. We have Delighted Halfling. Is a single green for a 1/2 creature halfling citizen. It taps for a colourless, and it also taps to add 1 mana of any colour, but you can spend that mana only to cast a legendary spell. And quite importantly, when you do it that way, that spell can't be countered. So this is another just very solid, very good card. The bar for a single mana dork is very low. Importantly, this isn't a mana dork that you want in your classic mono green decks, though, because it doesn't really. It doesn't help you cast your next mana dork or things like that. And also, just green doesn't really traditionally have that many legendaries. Like mono green doesn't not really have that many legendaries that you actually want to be ramping out. So this, for me anyway, is a card that is mainly for those 3-4 color decks that have green as their base, for like their fixing, that kind of stuff. This is going into a green based deck where you want to be casting like 3 mana Teferi or like Okos if you're running that. And like if you're in the 4 color Omnath deck, then I think this goes in that as well, just a way of getting some of your more higher impact multicolored spells down. And also in those decks, just the ability to fix all your mana for your most impactful spells and to be able to get through counter magic as well. It's just going to be very, very strong. I would say that kind of I think there is probably a conversation to be had about kind of what the tier list of these are. I'd probably say this is probably like the 4th or 5th best mana dork. I think I would put both Hierarchs above this and Birds of Paradise just consistently. So then it's kind of like, is it this or do you want like Jorga Tree Speaker or something like that as your next one in cube anyway? But even with it going there, it's still probably going to get played in every cube that's bigger than a 360, I would say. I think this might just be another auto-include going forward, or as close as there is to one nowadays.
Yeah, I'm really hyped about this card, actually. This is going to be great in the sort of green decks I enjoy drafting. I'm just really excited to cast an uncounterable to get turn 2 Teferi, to be honest.
Boo.
I think it is a legitimate, already pretty good thing to be doing of turn 1 Dork, turn 2 3 mana Planeswalker is so snowbally, and there are a lot of really good ones now. Got Grist, Teferi, Dak Faden, Red-Black Duretti, and this is just kind of perfect in that deck. A lot of your splash cards are actually gonna be Planeswalkers or legendary creatures. Yeah, I'm pretty high on this. I think I had my tier list of dorks pretty much exactly the same as you. I guess whether you want this or Jorga Tree Speaker says a lot about what sort of green deck you want to draft. Because they do go in very markedly different ones. But in terms of just enabling a really good play on turn 3 and a really good play on turn 4, this is going to be really good. And that uncounterable text does matter quite a bit. Yeah, I'm pretty high on this one. And I think it's worth saying the 2 toughness is also great just in terms of it's more relevant as a blocker, right? You'll be able to block some 1/1s at certain points of the game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it'll help you out against like a token deck or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Stop the bleeding a little bit. Cool. Right, do you want to take it away with our next green card, James?
Yeah, so next up in green, we have Elven Farsight. This is green for a sorcery. Scry 3, then reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, draw a card. I have heard this claimed as the Green Ponder. I'm really not buying it. It's you have to be very, very creature dense for this to be good, I think. Obviously, if you miss, it's a disaster on creatures. But you don't want to be in the spot where you have to keep a bad creature just so you draw a card. If you cast this on turn 4 and you're 2 non-creatures and an elf, well, I don't want the elf, but I have to keep the elf because otherwise I'm not drawing a card.
You could risk it. It is scry 3 and then reveal.
It is scry 3 and then reveal, but it's also awkward if you actually want one of the non-creatures, right?
Yes, very true.
And you don't want to put it on the bottom to try and reveal a creature, but you also, because you want to just draw it for your draw step next turn. But you also, if you leave it on top, you're just not drawing at all for this card, and you're just straight up down a card, which is pretty disastrous. I guess it could be playable in some sort of like elves deck, or where you're just incredibly creature dense, but really like
a 14 land elves thing or something.
Yeah, you're like, it would be so much stronger if it could hit a land or a creature, but just a creature, like I think this is a lot worse than Oath of Nissa, for example, and that's not a card that goes in many games.
No, that's fair. No, I do think there is room for one of these effects in green. So in mine, I'm currently running Abundant Harvest, which kind of it guarantees that you get one of the things that you want. So with that one, you choose land or non-land, and you go until you get one of those. I don't mind Abundant Harvest. I think there is room for some kind of card advantage in green, but yeah, maybe the fact you can just completely whiff off this, and you've just basically just effectively at that point you have wasted mana, and you will feel like you've wasted a draft pick as well. Probably not a good position to be in.
Yeah, I quite like Abundant Harvest as well, but Abundant Harvest does the thing you want. The fact this doesn't dig you towards lands means you're like one land hand with this is not a keepable hand, whereas with Abundant Harvest it is. I think this is like too many hoops for just not really any payoff.
No, makes sense. All right, let's move on to our next green card, and actually our last green card. We have Entish Restoration. It is 2 and a green for an instant. Sacrifice a land, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, instead search your library for up to 3 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So this is probably the best one of these effects that we've seen. So we have Harrow, which sacking the land is part of the cost, which is very bad if it gets countered, but with that the lands don't enter the battlefield tapped, which is an upside. Then you also have Roiling Regrowth, which doesn't have that drawback, but enter tapped. But the fact that this can let you get 3 lands does seem very solid, especially if you're already in a deck that wants to be sacrificing lands. So I'm thinking specifically like the deck running like the 5 mana Titania, that when you sack a land, you make it 5/3. If you have Titania in play, you'll already have your 4 or more toughness creature. Use this to make yourself another 5/3 and ramp yourself as well. That could be very much me kind of living in Magical Crystal Land, and in fact, I don't run either Harrow or Roiling Regrowth in my cube where I am trying to do a land sacrifice thing. But the fact that this gets 3 is quite tempting. Like the fact that this effectively lets you ultimate Omnath, the 4-color Omnath, or do all the abilities on Omnath with 1 card is quite nice.
Yeah, I think I'm actually on Harrow being a bit better than this. I think that untap text, I think I value having that really mana efficient turn early a bit higher than the upside of if you have a creature with power 4 or greater. Like often the time you have a creature with power 4 or greater is after you care about the ramp. Like, yeah, it's nice for triple landfall triggers, but when Harrow works and you get that mana efficient turn, it costs 1 mana, right?
Yeah.
So I think I'd be slightly higher on Harrow, and we don't see Harrow getting run in many cubes. This is a strong effect. It's sack a land, get 2 basics. Like your colors are fixed forever, and you get 2 landfall triggers, and you've ramped. So that's pretty nice. But I think ultimately, like most of the time, you'd rather just have a rampant growth, just to be able to play it a turn earlier.
No, definitely. That's fair. And it is probably also just worth mentioning that we don't really put crop rotation in the same category as this, because while crop rotation does sack a land, it lets you go and get any land, which is a big difference compared to these ones, which are only just the basics.
Yes, for sure. Crop rotation effects, they tend to shine in spots where your land is doing something other than just tapping for mana. Whereas this is, more landfall triggers, fix your colors, ramp a little bit. Nice. Next up, we have Pippin, Guard of the Citadel. This is a blue and a white for a legendary creature halfling soldier. It is a 2/2 with Vigilance and Ward 1, and it has tap. Target creature you control gains protection from the card type of your choice until end of turn. This is a powerful effect. It is very close to the Mother of Runes effect, actually, where it gains protection from a color of your choice until end of turn. It's going to blank a removal spell, or it's going to win a combat. You could argue the Mother of Runes effect is slightly better, because when they go to, if they try and like bolt your creature and you Mother of Runes it, well, then it also has protection from their, red creatures for the rest of the turn. But I think those effects are pretty close. But Mother of Runes costs 1 mana and protects itself. That's obviously the best of those effects. Then you've got Giver of Runes, which costs 1 mana and can't protect itself. I think those two are pretty clearly better than this. Getting that protection effect down early is just way more important than like a bit more power and the Ward 1. Honestly, I think Skrelv is probably better than this as well, which gives a sort of pseudo protection. If you pay some life, you have to pay Phyrexian mana to use it. And then once at the point where you have 3 versions of this effect that are better, well, how many do you realistically want to put in a cube? Would be my question. Like, it's a fine card. I kind of struggle to see the spot where you want to include it over any of those cards.
No, I think that's fair. And I think the fact that this is a guild slot as well makes it more tricky, because effectively you have way more monocolored cards that you can run than you do guild slots. So what you pick is very important. And yeah, do you take, even if you think this card is comparable to the other ones in terms of power level, you have the question of, do I use up one of my few guild slots on an effect I can get somewhere else, or do I not? So yeah, so it coming in over the other 3, I think is going to be tricky. I do like this card, but I do agree with everything that you've said. The fact that this is the only one that can attack while also giving while giving something else to protection, because it has that vigilance, that is nice, and it does have more power and toughness. But then that kind of is leading you down a Azorius deck that is kind of aggressive, and those aren't normally the decks that you kind of see in white, blue, and cube a lot of the time. Like you did mention earlier, the white deck like splashing blue for like a counter spell or something like that. But I don't think that is not an archetype. That is a deck that can be made from the cards there. It's not something that you're going to be kind of leaning your drafters towards, which is kind of generally what you want to be doing with your guild slots a lot of the time.
Yeah, 100%. And it's also, even if you're in that deck, you often don't have your blue mana on turn 2.
Yeah.
It is a good point, though, about attacking. I think like this is also a 2/2 unblockable if you want it to be that. You can just attack. Oh, no, it's another creature. Yeah. So they can just block it if you attack, yes.
Cool card, but yeah, just other ones out there might be doing more what we want. But let's move on to definitely a bigger card now. We have the Balrog of Moria. It is 4 black, and a red for an 8/8 legendary creature avatar demon. It has trample and haste, and when the Balrog of Moria dies, you may exile it. When you do, for each opponent, exile up to 1 target creature that player controls. It also has cycling for 3 and a red, which means you discard this card to draw a card. And when you cycle the Balrog of Moria, create 2 treasure tokens. So I hope this card is cheap. I do like reanimation effects that, or basically big, dumb creatures that put themselves into the graveyard. The reason for that is you have your reanimating cards, and basically this lets you skip the step of having a spell to discard them. Like you don't need a looting effect. You don't need a way of putting it into the graveyard. This does it itself. Having said all that, I think it's a very cool card to go in reanimated decks in more budget cubes. But in higher power level, I don't think it gets there. That's kind of the sweet spot for this, basically.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. The problem is, right, the cycling ability is just quite expensive. You want to be doing something a bit more impactful on turn 4 most of the time. But as you say, in a slightly low-powered budget cube, that might be completely fine. I think you absolutely do need to be probably in Reanimator, you need to care about having this in the graveyard, because if all you want to do is draw a card and make some treasures for 4 mana, you've got like Big Score, which is does that with a lot of upside. But yeah, I could see it as a nice like self-enabling reanimation thing in the low power cube. Sounds pretty cool. All right, next up we have Denethor, Ruling Steward. This is 1 a white and a black for a legendary creature human noble at uncommon. It's a 2/4, and it has, at the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn under your control, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token, and for 2 generic mana and sacrifice another creature, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So pretty obviously push towards aristocrats. It's nice that it enables itself. You can just sack your token, go to the end, drain them, go to the end step, get another token. The issue here is it is 2 mana every time. This is more than you normally want to pay for your sacrifice outlets. You really need to be triggering other things when you're activating this sack ability. If all you're doing is spending 2 mana and draining them for 1 and getting your token back, that's not really going to be a good enough way to use your mana in most games of Cube. But you're combining this with Blood Artist or Mayhem Devil or whatever, you could certainly get some work done. It's in a spot where it's not the best sacrifice outlet. You'd rather have the few ones, or if not that, then ones that cost 1 mana. 2 mana is a lot. And it's not the best way of getting more bodies. You'd rather have something like Bitter Blossom, even something like a Fearmancer does a really good job at holding down the board and gives you something to sacrifice that you can immediately get back in the same way this does. But it is both of those things on 1 card, and certainly a way those decks can lose is you draw loads of your cards that make tokens and nothing to sacrifice, and some Blood Artists, but you can't actually sacrifice those cards. Or the converse of you draw a bunch of good sacrifice outlets and payoffs, but you don't have the fodder. And it's nice that you get kind of both on 1 card here, even if neither part is the best version of that effect. So I think that all adds up to a playable, if not the most exciting Aristocrats card. Black-white is obviously, often you see like red-black as the default sacrifice colors, but Mardu is definitely also very real. So yeah, if that's an archetype in your cube, you can certainly consider this, I think.
Oh no, 100%. Like, this is the most aristocratic card to have ever aristocrated. Like, it does everything, not optimally, but it does do everything, and that, as you said, can be important. The fact that this is also an uncommon means that this will probably see a lot of play in Peasant Cube. Just as a solid role player, signpost card to what you can do in that archetype. Like, if someone sees this in a pack, you very quickly know that Aristocrats is a thing that you're doing. So, I think in kind of lower powered level cubes, this will see a fair amount of play and probably be a solid card as well.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, next up, we have Eowyn Fearless Knight. It is 2 red and a white for a 3/4 legendary creature human knight. It has haste, and when Eowyn Fearless Knight enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls with greater power. Legendary creatures you control gain protection from each of that creature's colors until end of turn. So I really like this card. I'm quite high on it. It just comes in and takes out your opponent's best creature. Sometimes they will not have a large creature, but in that case scenario, you are then just attacking with a 3/4 haste. That is fine. Yeah, I really like this card. This is one of the cards that's making me consider running like a legendary matters thing in Boros. It will require some setup for your cube, and I will probably have to do a video on it at some point. But like, I'm thinking running cards like Isamaru, the legendary 1 mana 2/2, and like Kithian, Hero of Akros, and like Ragavan. Just running some cheap, good, aggressive legendary creatures in Boros, and having this as your top end. This is like your reason to be Boros, your reason to combine the 2 colors. Because all you really have to do is just curve out play this, and then you probably just win. Like if you curve out a bunch of legendary creatures, or even some legendary creatures with your other just aggressive creatures, and then you're able to blank half of their blockers, swing through. That seems like a very interesting and very good reason to be Boros. Like, I'm actually going to be replacing Winota in my cube with this. I generally think it'll play better and will be more what those decks actually want to do.
Yeah, that sounds cool. This card's certainly a bit of a house. I actually played against this. We were jamming some games with our sealed decks after a pre-release, and my opponent cast this, and I went to put and exiled my lovely troll, and I went to put it under their card, and as you would with a Fiend Hunter, and then I was informed that I didn't get my card back, even if I killed the Eowyn, which was very
just
sad.
gone.
Yeah, it's just gone. Yeah, this is the games where you hit like their 4-drop with this. It's gonna be ridiculous. It's a 3 mana 3/4 haste that kills their thing and maybe enables attacks you wouldn't otherwise had. That's really strong. I wonder if you're underestimating slightly just the amount of games this is not going to have a target. I think especially I think this is at its best in cubes where they're quite creature-centric, and that's how most people are winning the games, is playing larger creatures. I think if there are more like combo game plans in the cube, or more control decks which are running low creature counts, I feel like there's going to be quite a lot of games where this is just a 4 mana 3/4 haste, which is pretty underrated really at this point.
But I don't think that's the end. Like, if this is getting through unblocked, then you'll probably already have a bit of a board state. I do completely acknowledge that. Yeah, there will be some games where that ability doesn't do anything. Then that just means you're swinging through with the rest of your board, hopefully.
Yeah, if you have a lot of pressure already, then certainly like 3/4 haste is not a bad card. But imagine the spots where they removed one of your 2-drop, they traded for your 3-drop. Would you rather have this to follow up with, or would you rather have like a Gideon, for example, or even something like a Hero of Blade Hold? This, they can take a couple of hits from it before they kill it. It doesn't snowball in the same way as some of those other 4-drops do.
No, that's fair. Yeah. This is definitely, I think, a bit more of a synergy card than something like the raw power level of like a Gideon, or I guess even like a Seasoned Dungeoneer, something like that. Yeah. This is definitely more. It goes in a deck and makes that deck, I do think better. But yeah, I do completely acknowledge that. Yeah, kind of raw power level, this could end up being a 3/4 haste some of the time.
All right, next up we have 4th Eolingas! ! This is a red, a white, and X for a sorcery. You create X 2/2 red human knight creature tokens with trample and haste. And whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to one or more players this turn, you become the monarch. I think this is actually quite a hard card to evaluate in terms of that monarchy text. It's pretty interesting. So obviously this scales pretty well with the game. Right? This is a lot more exciting at 5 or 6 mana than at 3 mana. But the thing is, monarchy is such a swingy mechanic that there will be spots where you can, your opponent taps out for like a coalition relic on turn 3, right? And then you just jam this as a 3 mana 2/2 haste, get the monarchy, and that's going to be really good. If they don't have a creature on board, they can't get it back. The monarchy snowballs. It doesn't matter if they kill your 2/2, or they can block your 2/2 next turn. I think this does play pretty awkwardly versus a slightly more built out board, even if you can play it for like X's 4 or 5, because let's say you make like 3 2/2s. They have some blockers. So you're like, right, well, I only have this turn as a window to get the monarchy. So I'm going to make a bunch of attacks. They're going to eat a couple of creatures, but a couple of them are going to get through. So I get my monarchy. Well, the problem is then you don't have blockers back, right? So they're just going to take that monarchy back off you. So I think it has against other creature decks, I think it maybe has some weaknesses. But I think the kind of split card of I can make a bunch of 2/2s later, like it's just scale very well. Like, when you get up into like 6-7 mana, this is just going to be a really big threat that kills them, and you don't, even if you don't care about Monarchy that much, the game's just going to end. And it has some outs of doing something early if you can get the Monarchy and they don't have creatures early. And as with all Monarchy cards, if you can pair it with that cheap removal, it makes those situations more frequent. You can remove their blockers or their creatures that might swing back and get the Monarchy back from you. I think this all adds up to an okay card, but I also kind of feel like I need to play with it.
No, I think that's fair. So I think I'm quite high on this card, if I'm honest with you. We've seen a lot of like the X mana make some 2/2s. This is the best by far of all of those, because these also because these can attack straight away. I was talking with the wife earlier, who if the listeners do not know, is very into Legacy. Apparently, people are testing this in Legacy now, and according to her, she's been speaking to people where actually playing X's 0 has still been very good.
Oh yeah,
just having a board having a bit of a board already, playing X's or very early in the game. If you have a creature your opponent has nothing, just paying 2 for this, just playing the Boros X's 0. You get in very early, you become the Monarch. That apparently has been good enough to like. I think that like someone top 8 something with it recently in Legacy. Like it must have been last weekend or something like that, because it's only just come out. But if the floor of this card is good at X's 0 and all the way up to like X's like 6 or 7, something like that, I think that will end up being quite powerful.
I must say I had not considered that X's 0 aspect of the card. Yeah, if you go 1-drop creature and you're on the play, and turn 2 you play this and take Monarchy, and they don't have a creature, you kind of just win, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You have Monarchy on turn 2. That's absurd.
It's one of the quickest ways to get it, I would say.
Yeah, 100%. Obviously, you get kind of blown out if you play a 1-drop, they pass, you cast this for 0, and then they like fatal push your 1-drop. You're real sad about it, but you know, I think if you're you got to take some risks, don't you?
Exactly.
Yeah, that does sound strong. If you have a lot of 1-drops, and the issue in there is you're like going to be very aggressive because you have lots of 1-drops, but then often you'd rather be mono white or mono red rather than Boros in those spots. I
completely agree. But I think what's nice about both Eolingus and Eowyn is that these are kind of reasons to be Boros.
That is true.
Like that's the main thing that Boros has been crying out for in Cube for quite a while. Like something to do that is better than the 2 individual colors, and maybe there is something there between Eowyn and Fourth Eolingus as kind of a like I do think Fourth Eolingus is probably better if you maybe already have tokens as well, or like this is where the Anthem comes in as well. Then it's a bit more play there, so it's different. I think they are different decks. Like Eowyn and Fourth Eolingus they don't go in the same deck, they go in different decks. But I think between them, we might be able to make something work in Boros that's cool.
I kind of like it. Could see cards being a good buff for Plateau and Cube, which did need some help. I like it. Okay.
Awesome. All right, let's take it away with our third Boros card of the day. I think Boros has more than any other guild. We're going to be looking at Shadowfax, Lord of Horses. It is 3, a red and a white, for a 4/4 legendary creature horse. Horses you control have haste. When Shadowfax, Lord of Horses, attacks, you may put a creature card with lesser power from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. So, the most important thing to mention is that this card is an uncommon, which is wild. This is just very good. Like, I think this is probably decent in most power level cubes, but the fact that you can play this in Peasant, I think, is going to be really, really stupid. The one, just being able to cheat on mana, this comes down on 5. It's a 4/4 haste. It's attacking straight away. If you're on the play, this is probably going to be bigger than what your opponent is doing. and it's bringing in a friend with it. That all seems very strong, and I think this is played quite strong at like pre-releases and that kind of stuff. The one drawback with this card that I can see in Cube is that a lot of the things that you would ideally wanting to be put into play have attack triggers. So things like Rabble Master cards, you won't get the attack trigger because they come in tapped and attacking. But being honest, you're not paying mana for it. Like I think that's magical Christmas land. Of me wanting everything from this card. But the fact is that you can still put like a Fury in with this. There's still plenty of big things you can put in, cheat on mana, and just kill your opponent. Like, I think Shadowfax is a very strong card.
Seems interesting. My main question is this haste word. I don't know what does the card tell me what that does. I don't know what that does.
Yes, James. Shadowfax shows us the meaning of haste.
Excellent. I can read it right on the card. I think I'm a little bit lower on this card than you. I guess I'm not really sure what the home is, because I feel like if we're in an aggressive Boros deck, then 5 is the top of our curve, right? So we're often just not going to have another creature in hand when we cast this. If we've curved out into it, would be my concern. And then I think a lot of the time I'd rather have most other 5 drops you would play. But I guess in Peasant Cube, I could see it there.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. Part of my hype for this card is based around that I'm comparing it against uncommons a lot of the time, and this just does a lot more.
Yeah, I can see that. Especially as well, it's nice if you have, if instead of having attack triggers, you have creatures with ETB triggers. Well, those you do get, and maybe they can actually get creatures out of the way and enable a good attack for you. It is worth noting, though, as well, the the creature does come in tapped and attacking. You can't use this to cheat on mana if that creature doesn't have a good attack.
Yeah.
If you're attacking this into their 3/3, you can't put in your 2/2. Well, I mean, you could, but in most situations, you won't want to.
But then, yeah. This will cause some very weird and interesting versions with blocks, because, like, if you're putting in a creature that they can trade with, it's like, cool, they can, or they can eat a smaller creature, but then they could just be taking 4 every turn.
Yeah, that's true. And if you're attacking with this and a bunch of other stuff, then maybe you're probably fine with them eating 1 creature if you're just getting in so much damage.
Yeah. If you've got your value already from it, from like an ETB, then you might just be okay with that, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, cheating on mana is really good, so I could certainly see it having some good spots. All right, next up in our gold cards, we have, I think, the first 3-color card of the day. This is Aragorn, King of Gondor. This is 1 blue, red, white, so 1 Jeskai for a 4/4. It's a legendary creature, human noble, with vigilance and lifelink. When Aragorn, King of Gondor, enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. Love pushing those monarch cards, and when Aragorn attacks, up to 1 target creature can't block this turn. If you're the monarch, creatures can't block this turn. This is a real scary card. Obviously hard to cast. It's and that it does kind of limit the decks it goes in, right? Because to really maximize this, well, to maximize the 3rd ability, it's like you want a lot of creatures, but then how many like aggressive creature-based decks are there that are in full Jeskai that can cast this on turn 4? Probably not that many, but also maybe it's fine if you're not maximizing that last ability, I could see this being really good in just a Jeskai control deck, where maybe you have a lot of creature removal, so you're pretty good at keeping the monarchy. And 4 mana 4/4 Vigilance Lifelink is also just going to keep you alive pretty well. That life gain's really nice on this. I think this is pretty damn strong, actually. I think, obviously hard to cast, but I think if you can cast it, and reasonably put this card in your deck, you're not going to be disappointed with it.
No, exactly. Yeah. My notes are pretty much what you said. Yeah. I'm not sure what deck this goes into, but I'm not sure it needs one. There will be shells that can make this work. Like, there's plenty of like pyromancer effects in Jeskai. Like, this would be perfectly fine as like the 4-mana top end. So like your deck is all like Monastery Mentors, that kind of stuff. Like you're making tokens that way. Because if you have any kind of board state, and if you can stay the Monarch for a turn, I'm kind of assuming you just win. Because your whole board's unblockable then.
Yeah, I could certainly see that being true if you have a board. But it's just the question then of, in your Jeskai decks, how often do you actually have a big board?
No, exactly.
And often the creatures you're playing are like evasive anyway, right? You're playing your like
they might fly
and whatnot. But but yeah, I think just 4-mana 4/4 Vigilance Lifelink, you become the Monarch, is a really strong card. I think, even if you didn't care about that at all, about the last bit at all, it would be pretty good. And, it enables attacks for itself pretty well. But it's pretty hard to block this. You have to have 2 good blocks for 4/4.
Yeah.
And Vigilance on a monarchy creature is really nice, because it lets you get in, gain your life, and still have a blocker back to keep the monarchy.
Yeah, I think it's scary. And also, like, one of the creature types that's quite easy to go in multiple colors is humans. Like, I've definitely played around before with humans across multiple colors, and when I did it, I don't think it ever properly got there, but I think that may be because I was trying to go into green a bit too much. But maybe there are more good blue humans than you think there are. Like, a lot of them just happen to be humans and stuff. So maybe that is where this could go.
Yeah, I could see it. Some sort of like multicolor humans aggro deck could be this could be sick if you can make it work. Play like Champion of Parish, 2-drop, Mantis Rider, this guy game.
Ooh, Mantis Rider, yeah.
Love a Mantis Rider.
Yeah. No, definitely. And then if that's something you're committing to, you can play. What's the land that taps for any color as long as it is casting a creature?
There's a few of them. There's Cavern of Souls is obviously great, but there's Unclaimed Territory, I think it's called.
That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
There's quite a few of them. Yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely. But yeah, those on top of like fetches and triumphs does make this easier to cast, which could be quite cool.
Yeah, I could see it. Anyway, if that one looks a bit too easy to cast, do you want to talk us through Aragorn the Unifier?
Yeah. Let's add another color in there. So Aragorn the Uniter is a red, a green, a white, and a blue for a 5/5 legendary creature human noble. Whenever you cast a white spell, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Whenever you cast a blue spell, scry 2. Whenever you cast a red spell, Aragorn the Uniter deals 3 damage to target opponent. And whenever you cast a green spell, target creature gets +4/+4 until the end of turn. So this obviously does a lot of things. You want to be in a very heavy multicolored format and deck to just firstly be able to cast this. Then what's tricky is you then want to have more multicolored spells to follow this up with. We do run Omnath in a lot of cubes. This is the same colors, but why Omnath gets in there as well is it's rewarding us for playing lands. We're going to be having lands in a 4-color deck to help us fix us, like things like fetch lands. We're going to be running lots of lands in those decks, because we need to be able to actually cast Omnath, and then we're rewarded when we do it. You kind of it's a kind of own self-built kind of engine in the deck. Aragorn the Uniter is a very cool card, and this might be one of I might build in Commander, but all those abilities are very cool, but it requires you to have more spells afterwards to really get the value out of it. Because if you can't follow it, because ideally you're casting ideally you cast Aragorn the Uniter on turn 4, then on turn 5 you cast Omnath, so you get all of the abilities triggering all at once. Because if you cast a multicolored spell, you get each trigger for each of the color of the spell that you've cast. I think in a regular cube, this will definitely struggle. But like there are like the chromatic cube is a thing on Arena. Like maybe this could see games there where just you have more fixing, you have more colors, and there's an environment built around doing multicolored things. Because as a multicolor payoff, this is quite strong in that, but inherently that is hard to do in most cubes where you are drafting your lands.
Yeah, I could see. Yeah, I think you can get away with a lot in the chromatic cube, is my understanding. I've not played a lot of it. You need to get away with quite a lot to play this. I think the difference between 3 and 4 colors is pretty huge, actually, especially on the 4 drop. Like the previous Aragorn is in the realm of like, well, you can splash this in your 2-color deck, but this is you have to be like you're probably giving up a lot to make your mana here. And that often means you're going to be behind on board when you cast this. And I don't really like that only one of these abilities really does anything to stabilize you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the red one doesn't even target a creature.
Yeah, the bottom 2 are just aggressive abilities. It's going to be really hard to be attacking with anything once you've got this in play, because a lot of the time, you've diddled around playing tap lands. Your opponent's had a good curve of creatures, and you can't afford to attack with your 5/5. They're just going to kill you on the crackback. Yeah, it's a cool card. It does a lot of powerful things, but I don't really see the home for this. Like why Omnath is so great, right? Is you play it, you play your land right away, you get your mana back right away, you've gained a bunch of life, that stabilizes you. Because you can follow it up with another spell. And it gives you your card back right away. But this doesn't really do any of those things. This would be great if you could, if you could like curve out with some creatures, cast this. If they don't kill it, it's going to go nuts next turn, and your board's going to kill them. But I just don't really see the spot where that's realistically a way you're building your deck with this casting cost in mind.
No, exactly. Yeah, just that casting cost is it's very tricky when you're not being rewarded really for it. Like your reward for drafting the 4 colors is that you can play this card, whereas with Omnath, you have fetch lands that kind of they trigger landfall abilities and everything kind of comes together a bit better. Like all these abilities on Aragorn are fine, but not as game ending or backbreakingly annoying as Omnath, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, next up we have Anduril, Flame of the West. This is 3 colorless mana for a legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +3/+1, and whenever equipped creature attacks, create 2 tapped 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying. If that creature is legendary, instead create 2 of those tokens that are tapped and attacking. And crucially, the equip cost is 2. So notably, the same casting cost and equip cost as the swords. I think if we were to rank these with the swords, if it was Sword of Anduril, Flame of the West, it's probably somewhere in the middle of the pack. I think it's definitely worse than like Sword of Fire and Ice and Sword of Feast and Famine, for example. Like not getting those protections is huge. It doesn't actually let your creature win combat that well. +3/+1 isn't going to keep it alive a lot of the time. And you've paid so much mana to get this equipped in play and equipped to something. I think this is just going to be too slow. Like the swords are mostly too slow at this point, and I think this is worse than the best swords. So I don't see this one seeing much play.
I think I would actually put this. I'm gonna top 2 we've said. I probably the one that like Mills and Dogs.
What's that one? Body and Mind is better than this for sure.
That's probably 3rd, but I would put this just below that. And part of my reasoning is that with all those other swords, if you don't have creatures, they do nothing. This is the same. Like you still need a creature to start this, but the fact that it makes flying spirits means that if the creature is removed, you can then just re-equip it to the tokens you've already made, and then you have 4/2 flyers repeatedly. from then onwards. In general, I think we are both of the consensus that none of the swords should really be played in cube in 2023. In lower power level cubes, I think this one could be fine, especially if you're doing tokens or if you're doing equipment matters. But yeah, just in general, don't run these.
I'd agree with that. It's also, it'd be a decent chunk higher on it if the tokens at least had the good grace to be untapped, so that you could block and not be dead after you've spent all of this mana. It's good against like people untapping and killing the equipped creature in that way, because it's giving you something to re-equip to, but it doesn't help if they're smacking you back with a lot of creatures. So yeah, it doesn't seem great to me.
No, all good. All right, let's move on to our next one. Next up, we have Horn of Gondor. It is 3 generic for a legendary artifact. When Horn of Gondor enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. It has the activate ability, pay 3 generic and tap it. Create X 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, where X is the number of humans that you control. So this is technically not a do nothing in enchantment or artifact, because it does make you a 1/1 for 3 mana. I think this is very strong, but this is very slow. This is almost like a 6-drop that you need a decent board to really take full advantage of.
It's a 6 mana 1/1.
It's a 6. No, it's a 6 mana 2/2. It's a 6 mana
for 2/1/1. Sorry, 6 mana raise the alarm. Yeah.
Yes, that's it. But there are, if you have a very heavy human section, I could see a point where you would try this. This is definitely a commander card. There's no other way around. This is definitely one made for commander where you're a humans deck. This will just make you a massive board state, and it will be quite strong. In cube, it's very hard to justify spending 3 mana for this and then spending another 3 mana when you could just play 2 creatures that would be better than this. Obviously, Magical Christmas Land, this could make you a massive board state, but at that point, you probably were already in a position where you were winning if you have that many humans for this to make you that massive board state.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. You need to be getting a lot of tokens for turn this enters, really. And even then, it's a lot of mana. 6 mana to play and activate this is I think, just too much. Theoretically, it does enable itself, right? If you had a lot of time, you can, even if you had no humans to start off with, you play this, you activate it, you have 2, then you have 4, then you have 8. But that's just not how games of cube really play out at this point. The games, you've got to be spending your mana more efficiently than this card, I think, ultimately. Just too much mana, I think, at this point.
Yep, no, definitely. All right, you want to take it away with the big card, the one that I hope a listener opens a very fancy version of.
Next up we have, I'm going to kill myself with this card, man. I'm going to really enjoy it. Next up we have the One Ring. It is 4 generic mana for a legendary artifact with indestructible, of course. When the One Ring enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. So it can be real hard to die next turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring, and you can tap it to put a burden counter on the One Ring, then draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. I think this is a really cool card. I think they've sort of captured the flavor of the thing quite well. So I think, in cube terms, I think the sort of obvious comparison to this is Coercive Portal, but it draws so many more cards than Coercive Portal. But it will kill you at some point. So by the time Coercive Portal has drawn you 1 card, this has drawn you 3 cards. You play it, you tap it, you draw a card, put a burden counter on it, you untap, you take 1, you draw 2 cards. The next turn it draws you 3 cards. So after 2 turns, you've drawn 6 cards with this. And the flow of cards is not slowing down, but neither is the loss of life, because at that point you're just bolting yourself every upkeep. having said that, there are things you can do about it, and you're drawing so many cards, you will be able to, if you have them in your deck, you will find them most likely. I think you obviously you need to be either killing your opponent, or you need to be finding a way to deal with the One Ring and stop it killing you after you've drawn your millions of cards from it. But there's some pretty good ways to do that. I think probably the best is just flickering it. You flicker it out, it now has no burden counters on it. It's up to you whether you want to put one on it at some point to draw one card, or if you just want to stop taking the damage. You also bounce it back to your hand. And at some point, you can even, obviously, you'd rather not be using your disenchants, or disenchant doesn't work, but your exile effects on your own cards. But, if you've drawn 6, even, after the next turn, you'll have drawn 10 cards from this, then you're fine. You can afford a bit of card disadvantage at that point. You could exile it or bounce it back to your hand, whatever you need to do. I think it's really cool. I'm quite excited to play with it. If you can get this down reasonably early, because obviously it is just card draw. It's not advancing your board in any other way. But the sort of turn of reprieve from being attacked that it gives you, followed by a lot of cards very quickly. I think this can be pretty strong. It's quite a nice thing to accelerate out of. You've got your colourless lands, you've got your signets, your talismans. In more powerful cubes, it's like a great thing to mana vault out, for example. Obviously, it doesn't stack well with those ones dealing you damage in the long term, but I think just the sheer quantity of cards is going to make this pretty good. But I could 100% be wrong and just kill myself with it all the time. But I'd believe that as well.
Now, what you said there about kind of the resetting part, that kind of definitely nudged something in my brain. There are so many sacrifice artifact effects currently in my cube.
Are you going to say Goblin Welder again?
I wasn't specifically, but again,
you would
it
not
just,
be wrong.
It just
I think this is really good with Welder.
Getting better, yeah. No, but so in mine, we are trying out the kind of black-red, sacrifice artifacts thing. So we have stuff like Only Cult Anvil, Duretti Ingenious Iconoclast, currently things like Breyer's Apprentice. These are all things that sacrifice artifacts, so you can keep control of the One Ring if you need it to. And then, Goblin Welder lets you just bring it back and forth, reset it, keep drawing loads of cards, keep you alive that little bit longer. Is it too slow, do you think? Or is it the fact, because in theory, best case, ideally you're playing this on turn 3 with like a Signet or a Mana Rock. So then what's that? Is that you're drawing one card on turn 3, 2 cards extra on turn 4? That probably is good enough, actually.
Yeah, it's listen, I think against aggro, you're mostly not going to be that happy with this card. The protection ring is nice, but it's just going to be your life total's already under pressure. It's going to be a problem pretty quickly. So you are going to have ways to deal with it. Think like Yorion, Venser, Flickerwisp, this sort of stuff. Ideally, you don't want to be sort of spending a whole card by Oblivion ringing this, for example. But you want to have something to do with this. Ideally, you'd want this out before turn 4, if you possibly can. But listen, I think it's definitely one to try. I think if you have Coercive Portal in the cube, this is most likely better. And I think in most cubes there'll be enough ways to deal with this and try and not die to it, but it'll be worth running and seeing how it plays.
No, definitely. Yeah, good to know that the One Ring is good. We like it. Yeah, the flavor of this one definitely also works a bit better than the ring tempts you mechanic, but yeah, cool card. All right, let's move on to our next artifact. We have Phial of Galadriel. It is 3 generic mana for a legendary artifact. If you would draw a card while you have no cards in hand, draw 2 cards instead. If you would gain life while you have 5 or less life, you gain twice that much life instead. And tap to add 1 mana of any color. So I will be completely honest, I was not originally fussed by this card, but when we played against it in the Streamer Showdown, it actually did quite a lot of work. Like I'm not sure what power level of cubes this goes into, but the decks that it goes into, I like quite a lot. Like, it is a solid payoff for like decks that, or for strategies that don't want to have cards in hand. Things like Hellbent cards or Madness card or like Madness decks, where kind of you run out of cards quickly because you're discarding them to make your creatures bigger. So like basically, this and like a Wild Mongrel is how I want to play Magic. Like, this is just giving you the stuff to fuel. Because also, like, it's not the first card you draw every turn. It's whenever you have no cards in hand. So if you have ways of drawing cards throughout a turn while you have none in hand, you can just be continually pitching them, this kind of stuff. I really like that, but I'm also aware that most of the time, this is just going to be a 3-mana rock that taps for 1. And I'm aware that's not really where we are in Cube. Probably haven't been there for a while, but I do think this effect is cool.
Yeah, the effect is powerful. I think there's a certain amount of tension in it with the decks that want to get empty-handed quickly, want to be playing more impactful things on turn 3 than essentially a glorified Manolith.
Yes, you'd definitely rather play like Angie's Ravager or something like that. I completely agree with that.
Exactly, and the decks that would be in for 3-mana rock, they might play the one where you put charge counters on it and you get 2 mana out of it. Those decks tend to keep hard in hand. They tend to have card draw spells. So I think it's going to be tricky to find the exactly the right home for this. But I agree it's a cool effect, and it's certainly, like, when it works, it looks very impressive. And yeah, it does have a nice spot in, if you go to your draw step empty-handed, you draw 2 cards, you like play a land, play a cantrip. Now your cantrip draws you 2 cards. That's pretty nice. But yeah, I think it's just going to be
definitely
tough to find the spot for the deck that both wants this effect and gets Hellbent reliably enough to use it.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, it's Hellbent is more kind of like, Hellbent is a Rakdos mechanic. It wants you to be going fast. This is kind of like, this is a mana rock. Like, it's a 3-mana mana rock. That's not really what those decks are known for.
Yeah, for sure. All right, next up we have Wizard's Rockets. This is a single generic mana for an artifact. It enters the battlefield tapped, and you can pay X mana and sacrifice it to add X mana in any combination of colors. So it fixes your mana. It doesn't generate mana, but it fixes mana. And when Wizard's Rockets is put into a graveyard from a battlefield, you draw a card. This is an egg. If you want eggs, this is not a bad one.
Is it an egg or a nut? I'm never sure the difference there.
What's a nut in Magic terms? This is news to me.
There is a difference. Hold on. MTG nut.
Well, Daniel Google's nuts.
Sorry.
So I think this is significantly worse than like Chromatic Star and Chromatic Sphere, because entering tapped is a pretty big drawback. You can't crack it right away. But it is nice that if you don't have to activate this ability in order to get the card. You can sacrifice it to another effect and get a card. So it can maybe do some shenanigans with Croc Clan Ironworks or something like that. Goblin Welder is a nice thing to welder out. You get your card back. And the fact that it color fixes as much mana as you want, rather than like Chromatics or even something like Terrarian, which I think this card's a bit close to actually. But you need wash for like 1 or 2 mana. So maybe if you had some infinite mana combos in your deck, you'd play like Zerda or something. This can then get you into as much colored mana as you want. The reality is all of these things are kind of niche. There's not that many cubes that really support eggs as an archetype, and if you just want 1 or 2 eggs or nuts, whatever they are, then Chromatic Star and Chromatic Sphere are better.
I'm still looking, by the way. There is a difference, but
this is not a bad card by any means. I just don't know how often we're going to want it.
No, I agree. So obviously, this coming into play tapped is definitely a downside. But like in larger cubes, I could see running this. Like I just generally have been more and more impressed with like Mishra's Bauble, Urza's Bauble, Chromatic Sphere, and Chromatic Star. Just kind of cheap artifacts that kind of just make things that little bit smoother, basically. This is definitely not as good as Chromatic Star or Chromatic Sphere, but if you were above 540, like if you were a 720 cube, I could see running the third one of these. Like that, I generally like them. Like they just most decks can run them as a way of kind of just smoothing or filtering if you're different colors, that kind of stuff. It's not as reliable as like a fetch land, but it will do the job if you need it to. But like, yeah, if you're in any kind of artifact based deck, like if you've got constructs and stuff, just having more artifacts, they all like that. And yeah. If you're larger than a 540, then I'd probably consider give Wizard Rocket a go. But if not, then you're probably good with just the Chromatic Sphere and Chromatic Star that we already have.
Yeah, I think the big downside for me as to this versus the Sphere and Star is that when you're like out of gas later in the game and you need to draw something now, drawing this is really bad because you're not getting your card until the next turn. You know?
No, definitely. No, I would agree. Like the other ones are more consistent, which is probably better. This one technically has a higher upside because it can do that filtering, but just the base level of it being a egg or nut. I will continue looking for this. The other ones are better, just more consistent, basically. Which is kind of you're running these to make your deck smoother, therefore you want them to be consistent, I think is the best way to describe it.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be on board with that.
All right, well, let's take it away with our first land of the day. We're going to be talking about Barad-dûr. It is a legendary land. Barad-dûr enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary creature. It taps to add a black, and it has the ability pay XX and a black, and tap it to amass Orcs X. Activate only if a creature died this turn. So basically what this means is when a creature dies, you can pump all your mana into it, and you get a creature that's pretty much half as large as the amount of mana that you put into it. That's what the XX is for. This seems pretty solid. Like it does seem a little slow, but in a grindy aristocrat deck, I'm thinking more of like the red-black aristocrats tend to be a bit more faster, but a bit more aggro. The white-black ones that are running things like Lurrus, that they can be a bit slower. This could have play there. Like it is just a mana sink effectively in those aristocrat decks. Like you can make like all you need to do is to get rid of a 1/1, and you could pump 7-8 mana into this. Get a 3/3, get a 4/4. That's quite good. That is a pretty solid beta. Or if you just want to just continually replacing the tokens that you make because you have Blood Artist effects, just put 3 mana into this and make a 1/1 every turn. You will eventually drain them out if you don't have another way of killing them.
Yeah, I could see this doing some work for sure. It's not what you're going to be spending your mana on very early, but you hopefully find a spot in the early game where you can play your tap land without it costing you too much. Or these decks do have some amount of legendary creatures, like Jadar, for example, often seems to play those decks, Yawgmoth, so sometimes it will enter untapped. And then later in the game, as you say, you flood out, and there are going to be spots where it's like, even if you're not sacrificing the creature, sometimes your creature just trades in combat or whatever, and you're like, yeah, cool, pay 5 mana, make a 2/2, and that's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Next up, we have Minas Tirith. This is also a legendary land and has the same text. Minas Tirith enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary creature. This one taps for a white, and you can pay 1 white and tap it to draw a card. Activate only if you attacked with 2 or more creatures this turn. So comparing this to Barad-dûr, I think the ability is kind of stronger, right? You'll use this earlier in the game if you've had a good curve out. So obviously this is pushing you towards an aggressive white deck, requirement to attack with 2 or more creatures. But I think kind of a flip side of that is the decks that this wants to go in are often pretty averse to having tap lands in them. Like you want to be playing a 1-drop on turn 1 a lot of the time. And so this is often going to cost you pretty meaningfully having this a tap land in your opening hand. They do actually have a lot of legendary creatures in there often. You've got like Kithian, Thalia, Adley. There's a lot of legendary creatures in these decks. So yeah, if you can sneak it in without it costing you too much to tap land, this is going to be very real. Like from not that late in the game, you're effectively playing 3 mana to draw a card, but those decks definitely can run out of gas. So I could see this being pretty effective.
Yeah, I quite like this. Like the point where this actually properly gets you is if this is the, I guess, the only land in your hand. Actually, no, I'm kind of thinking like, yeah, just because the amount of legendaries that it has, like, and as I'm also thinking of buffing up the number of legendaries in mine in white.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they do also sometimes kill your legendaries. As like I think there will be spots where it costs you for sure, but I could certainly see the reward being worth it.
100%, and yeah, like the actual payoff of this card is you're doing the thing that the deck is going to be doing anyway. You are going to be hopefully attacking with 2 or more creatures, and yeah, just giving yourself that little bit of extra reach, I think, is going to be pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, don't put this in like your blue-white control deck.
No,
there's no point.
All right, lovely. Let's move on to our final card of the day. We're going to be talking about Mount Doom. It is a legendary land. You can tap it and pay a life to add a black or a red. You can pay 1, a black and a red, and tap it to have Mount Doom deal 1 damage to each opponent. Or you can pay 5, a black and a red, and tap it to sacrifice Mount Doom and a legendary artifact. Choose up to 2 creatures, then destroy the rest. Activate only as a sorcery. So, can we agree to just ignore the bottom line? Like, I don't think that's... Like, actually, there probably are some legendary artifact creatures in here, in Cube and stuff. Like, Cauldron Complete, but maybe. But generally speaking, you are running this as a repeatable way of pinging your opponent out. If you're a Rakdos aggressive deck, this is kind of free to run because you don't care about your life total. You're just looking for ways of dealing your opponent some extra damage. Kind of this is kind of the flip side. This is like this is kind of like the flip of Minas Tirith. Basically, it's kind of like it's doing what the deck that it goes in wants to do. Like Minas Tirith wants you to be attacking. This just wants you to get your opponent's life total lower. Like this is basically here to deal them the final couple of points once your opponent has stabilized. Once you're in the aggro deck, once your opponent has played like the 5/5 or the 6/6 and you're out of removal, this gives you a way of finishing the game. You just have to kind of hold on, deal them the last bits of damage, and try and get there. I think it's fine. I think I'm not sure what power level of cube it goes into, if I'm honest with you. Like, red-black doesn't really have too many utility lands that it or kind of like interesting kind of lands that also tap for both colors. Kind of like, I don't think there's the Horizon land in black-red yet. Until that's printed, this could be a more interesting option.
I could see it. I'm not ignoring the last line because
I'm
Let's going
go.
to sacrifice my 1 ring before it kills me. Destroy the whole board. I will win both on flavor grounds.
I do love that, James.
Because I'm not dying to my 1 ring or my opponent's creatures because they're all dead. Yes, outside of that, the last line isn't very good. So the issue I have with... I think it's fine if you're very, very aggressive as a pain land that you can activate later to deal 1, but it is a lot of mana to deal 1. It's 4 mana essentially. You're tapping this land as well. And I think it's worth noting that this sort of pain land where it always deals a damage to you is a lot more costly than, for example, the cycle of plain lands of like Landwar Wastes and that cycle, for example, where they tap for a colourless or you can pay a life to make 1 of the colour. You will get to points in games where you just can't tap this mana anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty real cost. Like, this is definitely on average doing more damage to you than your opponent in like 90% of games, I think, right?
Yeah, but it's Mount Doom, that kind of.
Exactly, and I'm going to sacrifice my one ring. Yeah. Yeah, I'm a little bit skeptical of it as just like an aggro finisher. Like, I think it's worse at that, for example, than like a Ramnap Ruins, which obviously is a one color land, but it's it's a lot of mana to deal one damage to them, you know.
No, exactly, and I think that's where I'm kind of like struggling to work out what power level it goes into, because obviously this is a mythic. I can't imagine it'll be like, if this is expensive, it's entirely for flavor reasons primarily. It's like it's like a $5 that's just come out. Yeah, if this was super cheap, I could I would recommend this for ephemeral budget cubes, but it's a mythic and it's kind of like an iconic-y theme of a card, so it's probably going to end up being a bit pricey for those, unfortunately.
Yeah. Cool card, though.
Yeah. Awesome. Right. Well, that brings us to the end of the set review. But before we get everyone out of here, me and James, as a tradition, are going to give what we think are the top 5 cube cards from this set that we think are going to make the most impact, and which ones we like the most. There will be a bit of our own individual biases. There definitely is that with mine. James, what's your number 5? What's your 5th favorite card from the set?
Okay, and number 5, I have gone for Flowering of the White Tree. The white for an anthem that does more for your legends. I think this card's going to be pretty strong. Shaving a mana off Glorious Anthem is a pretty big game. See this being strong in Onseed's most white weenie decks. It's always shocking to be how many legends you just end up with in these decks. I could see this seeing a lot of play in a pretty sizable number of cubes, to be honest.
No, fair. Yeah. I think the Flowering of the White Tree is an awesome card. My number 5, I think mine might end up being a bit higher on yours, actually, but my number 5, I've gone for Delighted Halfling. So I think it is a perfect, it's a very solid mana dork. It lets you cast a lot of very powerful cards. But I guess the reason why it's not as high on mine as I think it's going to be on yours is because the 2 main cards that you want to be casting with it, or that are probably most impactful, I truly hate. Like, I hate 3 mana Teferi and I hate Oko. So that does seem, in theory, what you want to be following up Delighted Halfling with in like an ideal world. Like following up with one of those, and I can't deny that it's not going to be very strong because it will be. But Delighted Halfling, solid mana dork, even if I don't like some of the things that it's going to lead to.
That's very fair. I can understand that turn 2 Teferi is probably only fun from one side.
Oh, that's so problematic.
It's fine. You might have a counter spell. Oh no, it's uncounterable. Cool. Yeah. So number 4 is one which I'm sure there's a very real chance I'm massively overestimating it, but I've gone for the One Ring. I think I'm really excited to play with this card. It's gonna draw me so many cards. It's gonna be great. I probably can't be trusted to play with this card. I will not have discipline and assume I'm going to find a way to deal with it and then just die. But I think the upside is really high, and it's definitely going to be it's going to lead to some really good games. You know, my initial writing of the list, I had it at number 2, so I've exercised some discipline here.
Nice. No, it does seem sweet, and I'm glad that the card as iconic as that has some play. My number 4, I've gone for 4th Aerlingus. I just like this card. It gives me something that I want to do in Boros. And just as we've just seen over the years, Monarch is just very powerful. And if this is good as a 2-drop, as it is as a 6 or 7 drop, then I think this could be a very powerful card. So looking forward to playing with it. Need to pick one up.
Yeah, sure. I could certainly imagine this is what's meant to be on my list instead of One Ring. Cool. Number 3, I've gone for Orcish Bowmasters. I think this is just going to do enough in most matchups. It's going to snipe a 1 toughness creature, or they're going to be drawing extra cards, or it's just going to be, here's 2 bodies that get a little bit of value. Maybe I'm sacrificing them, maybe I'm in the wheels deck. I think it just has a lot of. It's going to do a surprising amount in a lot of games. Or I guess not surprising if you're following the legacy hype. But yeah, I think this card is going to be pretty strong.
Yep, I agree entirely with you, James. My number 3 is also Orcish Bowmasters. Yeah, I think 3 is a good level for this. I think it's going to be good in cube, but not as like the sun will still rise, everything will be okay, the format is fine. Like it's not going to break anything, but it'll just be a very good, very solid card. And
yeah, for sure. Number 2, I've gone for Delighted Halfling. Yeah, I think it's going to enable some really sweet turn 2, turn 3 plays. I think Uncancelable is a big deal. And it's also worth noting, like we talk about this a lot, like it can only cast legendary creatures. It still taps for a colourless. This is, you've already got your green mana if you've cast this. I think, yeah, this is a really strong dork. I think it's probably just below the hierarchs, but I'm definitely way more excited about putting this in my deck than Elvish Mystic. I think it's going to go into a lot of cubes and be really good.
No, 100%. Yeah, it's a very solid card. All right, my number 2 is Eowyn Fearless Knight. Similar to 4th Erlingus, it's a Boris card. I'm actually kind of excited for playing. Like, this has actually kind of given me something to build towards in Boris now. Like, we'll be having a chat with you in the next couple of days, going to give you a rough idea of what I'm thinking of, see what people in the Q pod think of it. But yeah, I'm thinking of going, trying out legendaries in Boris, and it's kind of this card has given me the impetus and kind of, I think it'll tie the room together nicely, basically, is what I think I'm saying.
Okay.
I think it should be good. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Number 1, I don't think is going to be a massive shock for me. I've gone for Reprieve. I think this card is just so flexible. It does something that white aggressive decks really, really want to do and don't have good tools to do at the moment. You compare this card to putting Mana Tithe in your deck. Mana Tithe's a lot funnier, but this is a lot better. And yeah, and not say it's only good in White Weenie. It's still going to be great in your blue-white control deck. It's Raman's great in your blue-white control deck. But on top of that, it also it goes in places you can't play Raman. So I think this is definitely for me going to be the most impactful card of the set. Cube.
Yeah, 100%. Reprieve is my number 1 too. I completely agree. It just does so much for an uncommon. Like, this will also be the most played cube card from this set. I think that's very easy to say. The sign of of like a staple of a good card is that it can be played. It is played in everything that can play it. This will be fantastic in Peasant. It'll be fantastic in Unpowered. It'll be fantastic on the Mitgo Vintage Cube, all the way up to the highest of power levels. This is just going to be a good card in all of them. And like, people just will not be expecting this as well. It's in white. That does, like, Remand is already a good card, but you've put it in white where people won't be expecting this. Where they've recently printed all the initiative creatures and stuff, and as they start coming into more and more cubes, we've kind of been playing them for quite a while, but like, only one initiative creature is on the Mitgo Vintage Cube. As they start putting more and more of these things in, white is just going to get better and better, and Reprieve is going to be it's going to be a cornerstone of that for the future, I think.
Yeah, 100% agree.
All right, thank you all very much for watching and listening. Do make sure you subscribe, follow, give it a 5-star review, whatever the positive affirmation that your podcast platform of choice allows you to do. It would all be greatly appreciated and really help me and James out. Just leaves me to thank James for being here. Thank you again, dude. Had a lot of fun and a lot of cool cards from the set.
Yeah, no, thanks, Dan. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I hope you enjoyed. If you got this far to the very bitter end, I presumably you found something good about it. And we'll see you soon for some more Cube content.
Yep, fantastic. You all take care, and we will see you all soon. Goodbye.